Hello, thank you for joining us today for the CREST Meet the Australia Advisory Board. Just to go through a few things before I hand over to Nigel Fair, who is the chairman of the Advisory Board in Australia. And we're just going to go through with regards to the questions. So at the end, you have your opportunity to ask any questions of the panel that you wish to. So please feel free to do that throughout, so that you don't forget what you want to ask. If you would like to type it into the question pane, we can then make sure that at the end we can get those questions asked for you and over. So please don't hold back. Make sure you ask what you need to ask today, and that would be really great. Just go on to the agenda. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Debbie Jones. I work in the marketing department for CREST. And we will be going around today to introduce the Australia Advisory Board, and we'll be doing the introductions, and I'll hand over to Nigel in a minute to do that. After everybody's introduced themselves, we'll be getting an update from Ian Glover, the president of CREST, and Nigel, and then we will be going on to the question and answer session. So over to you, Nigel. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to a comms update on what we're doing. So my name is Nigel Fair, for those of you that don't know me. My nominal job is at the University of New South Wales on the ADFA campus, looking after all their cybers there. Big thanks to you, Deb. Big thanks to Ali also for organising this call and for being up so late. You'll see on the screen you have a list of the advisory board members. I'll get the three that are on the call so far to give themselves a quick intro. Nick, I'll kick with you. Off with you, please.
Thanks, Nige, and again, thanks to the CREST team for staying up so late. So Nick Morgan, CEO of Triskel Labs. We work across advisory, pen test, and security operations centre. Big advocates for CREST, and we've been CREST registered company since almost the day that we started. So big supporters of what the group has been doing.
Cool, thanks. Matthew?
Yeah, hi, my name's Matt Dobinson. I was only recently appointed to the CREST Australia Advisory Board, but I'm the Australia-New Zealand lead for advanced attack and readiness operations and context information security, which is now a part of Accenture. And we do predominantly penetration testing and red teaming. And yeah, we were all quite big fans of CREST, as I'm sure everyone's quite aware. We have many CREST members all over the world, so a big supporter and happy to be part of the team now.
Yep, thank you. And Chat?
Yeah, so my name is Chatur Abedi, as Nigel said, commonly known as Chat in the Australian industry. And yeah, so I was, like Matt, I was recently appointed to the advisory board as well, and thanks for CREST and Nigel for the appointment. And yeah, I work in the KPMG Australia as associate director and leading the cyber defense service line, which including penetration testing and red teams. And so that's pretty much my day job, running red teams and advisory simulations and so on and so forth for our clients.
Awesome. Thank you, gents, and thank you for your ongoing support and time that you put into making CREST in Australia the success that it is and will be into the future. You'll see on the screen the list of the other advisory board members that were unable to, due to diary conflicts, make it today. Thanks, Deb. Ian, firstly, thank you for your continued efforts in supporting the Australian chapter and CREST in general over many, many years, and for being up so late at night. So I think we'll kick into it now if you're happy to lead off with the update. Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. I apologise, I've got no idea what the flashing light is in the background. It's not flashing in my study, so I'm sorry if the lighting's very, very odd. It's not that I'm still at a disco at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, but thank you, Nigel, for reminding me that I'm up late and a gentleman of my age. So would like to thank everybody for coming on. It's been an eventful year, I think, for everybody, but from a CREST perspective, I think our team, supported by the regional advisory boards, has made fantastic progress. And I would like to personally thank Nigel for all of his efforts he's put into actually helping us and all the rest of the team. I thought I'd go through just working against our normal quadrant, just to give you just some background in terms of some of the things that I think are important that are currently happening. So if we started with the accreditation side and the links between the company accreditation and some of the schemes we operate for regulators and governments, there's some really interesting stuff going on. We're just about to launch the formal VA accreditation service, and we are currently trying to talk to the PCI Council to see whether or not we can actually improve some of the standards for some of the VA elements associated with that particular standard. But I think that, again, our technical team have done a really good job in terms of defining an approach to evaluation of vulnerability analysis services, and I think that is something to look out for fairly soon. There's a few other ones that I thought I'd mention, particularly on the scheme side. So we have the cyber maturity model assessment from the Department of Defense in the US. That is going to relate to over 300,000 organizations within the Department of Defense supply chain. And we're currently working with the IT Acquisitions Council to define what the requirements are for organizations providing services in those areas. We're also working with the Centre for Internet Security, CIS, who've developed a very similar standard, and we are again looking at how we'd accredit those organisations providing services in that area. I think the interesting thing from that is already before it's formally launched and before it's actually sort of taken off with any size and scale, we're already seeing a European version being developed, and we've been asked to sit on the European Advisory Council to help to set that standard. And it's my thought that as soon as the Department of Defence have come out with something and then it's trundled along to Europe, it's very likely to travel into the other parts of the world. So I would take this opportunity to try to learn more about the CCMC and also to look at the standards that come under the Centre for Internet Security. As always, if you're a CREST member organisation, we don't charge you any additional fees associated with other disciplines and joining other schemes. There may be some charges associated with that, but that is to pay for the services from the US, not from a CREST perspective. But given the size and the scale of that particular implementation, and I think the opportunity there is for globalization of it, I would very much encourage the Australian members to have a look at those standards in some detail. We're also continuing to work with the PRA, which is the Bank of England in the UK, and the FCA. And we've now finalised the STAR-FS implementation guide. So that's the Simulated Targeted Attack and Response for financial services. We have agreement from both the Bank of England and the FCA that we can produce a generic version of their implementation guide. And therefore, at last, we'll have something that we can share more globally and we can share more consistently. And I think that's a really encouraging, good document. I think the big difference between the STAR-FS process and what we originally put forward for CBEST for the Bank of England is both initially the scale. So CBEST was for the 38 systemic risk areas within the UK financial services. So in other words, those things that if taken down would have a significant adverse effect on the UK economy, even more than COVID. And the STAR-FS process is to look at the tier 2s, so both they're still very large financial sector organisations, but it is the next layer down. And also under the FCA, we're looking at building societies and insurance companies. That increases the scale of that operation quite significantly. And I think the really exciting thing about the STAR-FS process is that it is not as reliant on input from the regulators. So in other words, it's much more the industry reporting to the regulators rather than under the CBEST program, the Bank of England helping with defining the scope, working through all of the projects, looking at all of the implementation plans and improvement plans, and working out what they're going to do next in terms of review and update. So the STAR-FS is as rigorous as a CBEST process, but it has slightly less direct involvement from the regulators. And at that point, I think that becomes a much more scalable and a much more easily implemented program for other parts of the world. The Bank of England had to recruit quite experienced people and then try to retain them to run the CBEST program. And I think the STAR FS program will allow that to operate without that level of direct support from the regulators. So again, very soon we'll have that generic guide, which I think will be really very useful. The other one I wanted to mention was something called Assure. We've done quite a lot of work with the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK and also IATA, and IATA are looking at some other related standards. But under the Assure program, there is there's the NIST directive, the NIS directive. That is looking at critical national infrastructure and providing reports into the regulator. What the CAA have done is to define the NIST standard within a questionnaire. They've also then looked at their cyber assessment framework, combine those two elements together to look at both operational and IT systems. And what's happening, because we've already run now a couple of those, is that the organisation that's regulated provides a report back to the regulator, and then the private sector, in other words, CREST member companies, then validate that response. They don't come out with an opinion. The opinion is still from the regulator, but I think the way that the CAA have implemented that means that we can easily apply it to other aviation authorities throughout the world. But more importantly, because it's under the NIST directive, we can apply it quite easily to the rest of the critical national infrastructure. So we've got permission from the CAA to develop again a generic guide, and we'll be asking for input on that fairly soon. But again, I think that's one to watch because that is, I think, the best implementation of the NIST directive that I've seen globally. And I think it's both scalable and something that our members can provide services to. The last one I thought I'd mention is that we've been approached by the UK Cabinet Office, but now also aviation and the health service and another part of government to look at physical penetration testing. So that used to be very popular and then disappeared a little bit because of some of the concerns we had about sort of global terrorism. But physical penetration testing of buildings and elements associated with the landscape of the organisations is very much coming back in favour. But what we wanted to do is to ensure that that's done in a much more controlled way than it used to be. So we're looking at the triage processes, we're looking at all sorts of other elements that would need to be put in place to allow that type of physical penetration testing to be operated. So this means that we can therefore start to look at the technical element associated with penetration testing. We can look at the social engineering, which we already do, but I think definitely could be improved. And now we can also start looking at the physical elements. And we did quite a big survey of our member companies, and quite a few of the members already provide those sort of physical aspects associated with their penetration tests. So that one is progressing. We're on about our third workshop. But again, the idea is that what we'll do is to implement a generic guide which will make available throughout our community. So I think if you just look at that in its totality, there's some really big supply chain work that's going on. There's some really interesting work that's being conducted that looks at the NIST directive, and we're looking to extend both in terms of areas like vulnerability assessment and also physical penetration testing. Moving on to the professional qualifications, one of the limitations we've always had is that there's a bit of a catch-22 that we can't run our exams if we don't have qualified individuals, and we can't get qualified individuals because we can't run our exams. So we've been working very hard over the last 6 months, really accelerated due to COVID, but it was our plans anyway, to move the technical assessment elements of our examinations onto a learning on demand platform, which we can then overlay that onto the Pearson VUE systems. We are initially looking at the registered level qualifications, and we should be into beta certainly within the next 3 weeks or so. So we are hoping that the CRT element will go live certainly before the end of the year. And then what we've got is the rest of the certified qualifications will follow on from that as well. So the idea is that will allow us the opportunity to provide all of the elements of our examinations at any of the Pearson VUE Gold Centres in any parts of the world. And that would certainly overcome some of the difficulties we've had in Australia in terms of delivery. We always seem to put it in the wrong place for Australia, and we always seem to have a little bit of difficulty, but this will overcome that completely. And not only that will, I think, result in quite significant savings, which will pass on in one form or another. One of the things that we are doing in that space as well is we are working towards the ability to issue charter status for people who hold certified level qualifications. We're looking at some of the institutions that issue charter status, and we are in advanced negotiation, I would suggest, to be able to do that fairly soon. So again, I think probably first quarter of 2021, we'll start to be in a position to offer charter status for individuals that hold our certified level qualifications. The bits we are still working towards is what we have to do in terms of CPD. We're arguing that the reassessment is more than adequate, but there may be some requirements to demonstrate context. So it may have to be that there might be some other elements of CPD we'd have to add in. But I think I'm very hopeful that will be done in a structured way. And I'm trying to do it in a way that will not add any additional cost to either the member companies or the individuals. So it's a very much in terms of, if I can provide cost savings in terms of the delivery of examinations, what I'll do is I'll pass those back through as being a way of immediately generating a charter status for individuals. And again, I think with the move towards technical assurance and the move towards the need for the regulators to have an opinion, and the need to have professional advice and guidance provided during incident response, that those charter status elements will be used a great deal more. So we're very much, I think, in the forefront of driving this type of concept, and we're very much advanced. So I can't see any reason why we're going to fail on that one. I think it could be towards the second quarter of 2021, but if everything goes well, it will be in the first quarter. So we've got a lot of things happening between now and Christmas, and then up until April. If we then move on to the professional development side, there is quite a lot we're doing in terms of Debbie's team to reorganise our conferences. I really apologise that I haven't got to Australia. I did come and then nobody would see me apart from Nigel. Thank you for the dinner, Nigel. But what we're trying to do is to organise our conferences in a much more easily deliverable format. So we could have easily straight away gone to a virtual delivery model. But what we wanted to do is to do it in a very professional way. So we have delayed some of the physical conferencing throughout the world. But for next year, we'll be doing it in a much more structured way, and hopefully we can start to get together to share some experiences. But what we are still doing is recording quite a lot of material, and all of that material is going up on the CREST Advocate YouTube channel. And I'd really encourage people from Australasia to provide us content to add into that. And what I'll do is gradually build additional playlists, and those playlists could start to form part of the CPD requirements for the charter status. That's the other discussions that we're currently having. On the knowledge sharing, then we've been doing some work looking at issues associated with data protection. Data protection isn't something that immediately springs to mind when we're talking about penetration testing and incident response and threat intelligence. But what we have to do is to make sure that if we're doing penetration tests where we are identifying individuals, using individuals' credentials to gain access to information or to escalate privilege, that doesn't breach data protection rules. And so we've produced quite a considered paper. We passed that through the Australian Advisory Group. And what we're now trying to do is to identify the different data protection registrars or individuals that are responsible for data protection in country, and then try to get an opinion. It's obviously a very controversial thing to do, because we're actually taking a potential problem that the regulators might not have seen, and then we're trying to suggest a solution to it. But from our perspective, the solution is that you should work from an accredited company, signed up to an effective code of conduct and code of ethics, and an individual should hold certain qualifications, and again be tied under certain controls in terms of the type of operation, and again underpinned by codes of conduct and codes of ethics. So from our perspective, that's a very important piece of work, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that we, as our CREST member companies, all operate in a legal framework that would be acceptable globally. So again, I'm quite hopeful of that. We've had no negative feedback yet, but what we haven't had is positive feedback, so we're gradually driving that through. One of the other big research projects we're doing, we have a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that's to look at the development of an ecosystem within a number of African and Asian countries, basically to make sure that access to banking is available to the poor. Their view is to get people out of poverty, you have to give them a bank account. And that's, I think a very interesting way of looking at things. They're also doing quite a lot on identity and access management with some other consortium members. But our project is really looking at building a cybersecurity ecosystem which will protect the existing financial services market, but also to look at the future in terms of disruptive financial services deliveries. So we're currently doing maturity model assessments in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tanzania and Uganda. We've already had Ghana come to us and say, why didn't we include them? So we're doing an element of this work in Ghana. And we've also done an element of the work in Rwanda because that's where Carnegie Mellon are putting their African cybersecurity campus. In terms of the assessment, it's both qualitative and quantitative. So we're looking at everything from the qualitative side in terms of the service providers that are already operating in country, but we're also looking at government policy, whether or not they've got certs and information sharing platforms, whether or not the regulators are actively involved in the cybersecurity market. We're looking at academia and training to make sure there's a development pathway for individuals. We're looking at law enforcement, and there's a number of other things we look at from a qualitative perspective. We're also doing a quantitative analysis, which is a non-intrusive vulnerability assessment and threat assessment. And we've done that in the region of the top 100 financial services organizations in each of the countries. The idea behind that is we have a basket of currencies, if you like, at that point, where we can come out with a country level score in terms of basic cyber hygiene. In other words, things that the attackers could easily see from the internet. From that, we're going to start to build quite a lot of really interesting guidance. So there's guidance to help improve the basic cyber hygiene. There's guidance to help with intervention points to stop young people being groomed into cyber crime activities. And if you look at some of those countries where we've done the maturity model assessment, that's certainly a significant problem. And we're also looking for good practice in terms of challenger banks, financial exchanges, and elements of other disruptive financial services. So we will be putting out a call for assistance to help put together some of those guidance, which would help those challenger banks overcome some of the difficulties we've seen in existing financial services. There is a couple of presentations that we've now recorded, and we can make those available. I'm sure Debbie will share those. But I think that's a really fantastic opportunity for us to look at some of the generic guidance which can be made available to the community, and also to help build out the overall ecosystem. So basically, we are working really hard to build that capacity. So the work we're doing in terms of developmental activities and the examinations, to build capability, again, looking at CPDs, looking at actually the professionalization of the industry and the provision of more content. And then that consistency we're doing through some of the implementation guides and then some of the generic guidance we're providing in the future. So there's a lot of work going on, and most of that is being done through our regional advisory boards. And again, I'd really like to thank them on your behalf for the contribution they're making. But from my perspective, it's a really important time, and it's a really exciting time, and I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from the global market in terms of how we can introduce some of those things into the Australasian market. So thank you, Nigel.
Thanks, Ian. That's very comprehensive and a lot going on. Of course, you're always welcome here, particularly straight after we beat you in any sporting event. So thanks. That's amazing. I might just add some comments for everyone just on our local angle, particularly with exams. For some of you, you might have realised last year, or into this year, but mainly last year, we were using the Australian Computer Society offices in both Melbourne and Sydney to hold our exams. And since COVID, they have closed those down. And I was only talking to them 2 weeks ago, and they're unlikely to open them any time this calendar year. So the more that we can move the exams in through a Pearson View Centre, the better it'll be sort of for everyone. Of course, from my understanding, most, if not all, the Pearson VUE centres across Australia are actually open at the moment. So that's a good thing for those people whose certifications are starting to run out, and of which many will be starting to run out because there hasn't been exams held for some time. So we're dead keen on doing that. Speaking of the conference, there was going to be a conference this year. We've postponed till April next year to run it on the back of B-Sides Canberra, in Canberra, which gets a big regular following. Who would know whether we'll be doing a conference in April? I think that's probably what it really comes down to. We'll cross our fingers. We'll make a decision probably close towards the end of this calendar year, maybe very early next year, but we'll give everyone plenty of notice and updates on that. But fingers crossed we get to run an event. But as Ian said, we live in interesting times. I think, Ian, my takeaway out of that is what you alluded to right at the end. There is so much. This is a global situation. There is so much going on internationally. The more that the great work you guys do around the region that we can de-identify for the region and use it for our regulators, and that would be the call out I'd put to everyone that's out there listening to this. If you've got any great ideas, so it's great we have a great and invested advisory committee. We're always looking for people with great ideas to support CREST and its aims more broadly. So if there's a regulator you think we need to talk to, reach out to me specifically. If there's some sector that you think would need some help and there's some collateral that's being done out of the UK or elsewhere, please contact us and we'll get onto them. We'll have that conversation. We'll try and drive CREST benefits and CREST valued membership for everyone out there that's a member. So, Deb, where are we up to now?
So we can get into the question and answer session. We've got a few questions that have come in, and you can probably cover some of the specifics really behind them. So from those questions. So if you're ready to get started,
absolutely.
We'll get on to that question and answer session. Okay, so one of the questions that we've had come in. So, does CREST have any plans to expand the equivalency program in Australia?
Ooh, that's an easy question.
Yeah, sorry, Nigel, I jumped in there. I apologise.
No, you're right.
So right now, so in Australia, it's first of all an interesting thing because the global relationships that we have there, they are global. So we've looked at the major providers. We are looking to extend. If you look at the work that's been done with EC Council, for example, their ECSA is being reworked and is likely to be combined with their LPT. So the ECSA will be slightly more difficult and the LPT element, so the Licence Penetration Tester, will be merged back in. With offensive security, we're looking at the OSCE as well to see where that fits in with the overall ecosystem. We absolutely would have done that if it hadn't been for COVID. I think that I apologise for using COVID as an excuse, but for that one, it's actually quite genuine. I think that we are speaking to CompTIA. Obviously, that's at the entry level, the CompTIA Security Plus, CompTIA Pentest Plus. But again, I think if we could have some formal agreement in terms of where that sits in the career pathway, that would be really very helpful. And then we are, particularly through the IT Acquisitions Council and the Centre for Internet Security, we're having a new dialogue with SANS. The SANS relationship has been an odd one over the years, and we spent an awful lot of time helping them define what the penetration testing examination should look like and professional content for their training courses. We thought that was going to be around about an 8-week course, and they made GPEN a week. So again, it didn't quite go in the direction that we thought it was going to go. But now we think, particularly under the directions of the CMMC and some of the other initiatives that are happening in the States, that SANS are now starting to approach us. There are a few others that could fall into that professional certification route. And again, I'd very much be interested in what the Australasian market actually thinks about some of those qualifications. So that's in the sort of penetration testing. We're doing some work at the moment on incident response. We have our cyber incident response focus group, and that's looking at career pathways and qualifications. And certainly in the incident response, we are not really interested in developing forensics related examinations because we believe they're available in the marketplace. We would like to improve our intrusion analysis and reverse engineering, and there's probably some other bits that we're going to add into that pathway. That is also likely to be supported by the UK government. They're doing some part sponsorship of some of the research necessary for that, but I think there will be more equivalencies coming into there. I think if you look at things like Assure, and again also the CMMC, what we're seeing is that there are some audit requirements in there, and at the moment there isn't really a register of auditors that have all signed up to a professional certification with codes of conduct and codes of ethics. So we're running the registers of some of those elements as well. So we'd like to extend the formal relationship we have with other professional qualifications in the domains in which we work. We've been driven to include others as part of some of the bigger frameworks, and there are some new ones that I think probably need to be developed. But again, if anybody's got a view in terms of what they perceive this should look like, then please let me know, because I'll feed those into some of the things that we're currently working on.
I think the incident response side is really key. As an organisation, we're seeing a lot more incident response ongoing. It kind of feels like Australia started to wake up a little bit, and especially the awesome work the ACSC is doing at the moment, and notifying Australian companies when they've been breached. And then it's tough. I've had this conversation with a lot of organisations to say, okay, well, who do we go to if we get the dastardly email from ACSC or the phone call? Who do we turn to? There's the big global billion-dollar companies that will come in to assist, but they've got a $1 billion price tag that goes with them. So that's really key for CREST to start helping Australian organisations with, is not just the pen testing and the offensive side of things, but then the breach response, to say, right, who do we turn to? What do we do? Rather than just jumping on Google, and you could end up with someone who's not gone through any formal qualification or certification. They tell you nothing's happened when really you've had a breach. So that's really important work, I think, for CREST to start heading down.
And I agree, Nick. I mean, if you look at the work we're potentially doing, that will be with the National Cybersecurity Centre, so part of GCHQ. They have something called the CIR scheme, which we help them to develop, and then that's for the state-sponsored attack and very critical parts of the UK government. And what we've done is we've already got the CSIR scheme, which we've rolled out internationally, and also the work we did with the NSA, which is now transferred over to the DoD. So I think there's some really good lessons. But again, if we can be introduced to the ACSC to actually describe what's happening in incident response and what a good team might look like and how we might contribute together, I think everybody wins. So a good collaboration opportunity, I think, Nick.
For sure. Defensive meets offensive and purple teaming. Who would have thought we'd eventually get here in Australia, right?
Yeah, well, I don't like purple teaming very much. We try, as we always do, we invent new terms, and I think attack replay is actually quite a good term. Again, purple teaming can mean an awful lot of things. It's a bit like red teaming in certain parts of the world is Nessus.
We won't get into the Australian organisations and red teaming for this panel. It's probably one that we should keep for the CREST Con, because there's a lot of confusion on red teaming in Australia, to say the least. A 3-day engagement.
Simulated targeted attack is a good term, and I think attack replay is not a bad term either. So we're just trying to be more descriptive rather than colourful, I think, is the approach.
I add into that, I think the confusion around the Australian organisation around what is red team. I think the great work doing by the financial regulations at the moment, going to be key to defining that criteria. What is a red team engagement look like, and how you do advisory, simulation and so on and so forth, and include that in the red team. And then that 3-day into a like a 6 months sort of an engagement is like a clear definition in the frameworks. I think that's currently been developed and not publicly known, and it's coming. And as you pointed out, Nick, so the incident response is a key area, and then that's where you drive threat intel and then actually try to simulate an advisory within a red team engagement. So in recent months, a few of the red teams I was working on actually in the end sort of, drive down the path of being a little bit of purple element into it. So not necessarily a replay, but then working with the blue team in order to, just replay our attacks and see how they are, coping up with what they have missed. So, it's picking up. A lot of organizations, not just in the FSI market, even retail and certain degree of superannuation market is also looking at not just pen test or red team, how we can actually build their capabilities better in terms of defensive.
But again, chat, we're more than happy to provide everything we can to support that, and the generic guidance on the STAR process I think would be a really good thing to share with some of those organizations. I actually think the implementation guide that's been written is very good, and I think it's much more easily understood by the regulators because we're using a lot better language, I think, this time. So I think we're in a good position. Also, the SAS qualification is one of the ones I'm driving forward in terms of trying to put onto the Learning on Demand platform through Pearson VUE. We think that's going to be a two-stage on that one. So we think the first launch of that will be slightly easier than the current SAS. So it's probably going to operate at a sort of registered or slightly above level. So we're trying to develop a career pathway into that simulated target attack and response as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great area for the Australian organizations to explore as well. And in terms of certification, if you're a technical person, that's a great area to be.
Good.
Yeah, anyone listening to this, if you're wanting to head down that DFIR space, Australian organisations are starting to really demand this. I'm seeing it every day. Level 3 threat hunter and threat intelligence roles popping up all the time. Nearly every SOC is seeking a threat hunter and IR responders at the moment. So really good area for everyone to head down, and with the CREST support as well.
Yep. No, awesome. While we're throwing in controversial terms, I'll say active defence too for throwing some confusion into the marketplace.
That's great. I can see a whole new panel session coming out of this one with a few questions. I think, yeah, we'll keep that one going, I think. So just moving on to another question that has come in, which is around exams in Australia, and when it's the exam centres likely to open, and how is that going to get going again after COVID-19 times?
Sure, thanks. I'll take that one, as I alluded to it briefly before. It's a bit of I don't think we know. We will stick with the ACS in both Sydney and Melbourne. They've offered up their offices all around Australia. We have mobile rig in Australia. Thank you to Ian for the postage of that. And it's essentially ready to go. We had some initial issues with latency of the mobile rigs. That is being worked on still as we speak, but I think we've got two things we've got to cover. One is we've got to wait physically for a room location that is acceptable to be open, and then secondly, we actually need to get from people sitting exams personal comfort that they're ready to go into a socially distanced exam room, and B, that their employer is happy for them to go and do that. So I think we've got a little bit of work, and I would very much doubt we'd be running exams this calendar year based on those couple of metrics. But basically as soon as possible, because there's a lot of people out there, and Deb, I know you and Ali have done great work reaching out to people who've either got expired or soon to expire exams. We've got a lot of people that need to research. So I think Pearson VUE is going to be our saviour, as Ian mentioned before, particularly up to the certified level.
So certainly some of the Pearson VUE centres have been open in Australia. So some of those examinations have been going through, and obviously we're still operating the equivalencies as well. So people have got the equivalency qualifications, and that there's still opportunity. But we will make sure that nobody is disadvantaged. We're looking at that all the time. We have to do this not unilaterally. We have to make sure that everybody is involved. And therefore, whenever we do an extension, what we have to do is to get agreement from some of the regulators around the world that they're happy to accept those extensions as well. So we've done it in the best way we can. We keep nudging it in a rightward direction, but I promise that we'll make sure that people aren't disadvantaged.
Cool, thanks.
Great, thank you. So keeping in with the theme of exams and just moving on to training. So we've had a few questions come in around the training, and what I'm going to try and do is just to sort of put those together so that you can talk about it as a whole. But people have been sort of saying that they wonder whether there should be separate fees for students and individuals and businesses. And currently, there is no official course material available for CISP or for some of the other exams. So they've then gone on to say that it's a lot of the training providers that are on the CREST website are based in the UK, and of course, because of time differences, it's sometimes hard to go on those training courses and things like that. So yeah, just looking at the whole training piece as a whole, and really how CREST's going to sort of grow that within the Australian market.
So if I take it, and then Nigel, maybe you're coming from the academic perspective.
Yep.
The decision was made quite early that CREST wouldn't provide direct training. That there is obviously a potential conflict of interest between a training provider who provides the content and then an examination based on the content that they've just taught. So the choice that we made quite a long time ago was that we would not be in the training market. What we do is we publish much more of our syllabus detail than anybody else, and encourage other training providers to come into the market. That means that it could be rig-based, it could be find the flag exercises, it could be classroom-based, it could be remote learning, all of those different things that I think really make the training environment a lot richer. We're also seeing in different parts of the world academia basing some of their degree courses, particularly in some of the technical areas, on our syllabus domain as well. So we're seeing that type of work. What I would say is that if there are training providers in Australia, then please let us know, provide the contact details. We're more than happy through Nigel and his offices to contact them and then put them on our approved list. We are working with the training providers to improve the way that we're going through the approval process, which is very easy for you to say. But we think that is still the right direction. So what we want to do is to encourage local organisations to develop the training material. But what we want to do is to provide them as much as we possibly can. Again, with the Learning on Demand platform, there is an opportunity, I think, to move some of our examination material into a sort of experimental area, and that's one of the things we're looking at. But what I want to do is to get the examinations up and running first. So there are opportunities. We should be encouraging both our member companies and training providers in the Australasian market to operate both within country, but also to operate internationally, and we'll advertise those as best we can. If you take your close proximity to Asia, then some of the money that we'll get from the Gates Foundation to develop some of those areas, there is quite a big opportunity. You know, we will be running examinations, we will be running developmental things funded by the Gates Foundation, and so there's an opportunity both in the domestic market and internationally. But let us know if you want to do training. Please come to us. I'm sure a lot of the larger organisations have got their own development rigs, and there is an opportunity to extend that into the more traditional training market. Nigel, did you want to say anything about academia?
Sure. So there's a handful of universities in Australia which have either become or becoming academic partners, which is a great thing. We have 43 universities in this country. They don't all do, you call it InfoSec related courses, but a large chunk of them do. Mind you, a large chunk of them do because they think it's a cash cow, but that's a story for another day. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the work that they need to put into it in their syllabus, and the concern that they're just providing, called a boot camp, that, you know, we all know if you do say a CISSP, you sit a 4-day course and you regurgitate out on the 5th day everything you just absorbed. And it's getting away from that model to actually genuine learning where people can pass, you know, an exam or exam sets afterwards. So I think we've got a little way to go to developing the university market. Universities, I can tell you from experience, is like the public service from the 1970s and move at a glacial pace.
I think just to finish on that, Nigel, I think that if you look at the maturity model assessments that we've run, we've been developing for a number of years, but now we've formalised through the Gates Foundation work. I genuinely think that we should next year we've already allocated some of the budget to potentially run a maturity model assessment in Australia. I think that will help us to identify opportunities both in the academic community and in the training community to actually build stronger relationships. It'll also provide some KPIs, which I think would be really useful for the government and some of the regulators to measure their performance against.
Yep, no, I agree. It'd be good to get some training providers doing this sort of stuff. A bit of competition might spark some more people into the space.
Yeah. But if you score low as a country, I'm sure that at that point competition comes in and we'll be able to find some funding and some support. But if people want support, then please ask us. You know, we want more training providers, and therefore we don't want to tax the industry. What we want to do is to encourage development. And certainly, again, when Matt and Nick were talking about incident response, we want to encourage more training in incident response. I think there is a big lack of that. And what we've done is we've actually pump primed some of the development of some of the threat intelligence training. So we're not adverse to spending some money to help organisations develop where we perceive there are gaps in the market.
Yep, thanks. Debbie, I know we're technically at time. Did we want to do another question or?
Yeah, we've just got another one come in for all of the panel. So basically this one is, what is the current situation and what's happening with CREST ANZ? Because they said they've still got the CREST logo and the name on the website.
Yep.
Oh. Contentious topic for this whole group.
Great last question, eh?
Probably the best last question, isn't that, Nigel?
I think so, Nick. I think so. Look, I'll start, then Ian might want to add something, but unfortunately, yes, they still have a website. It's an interesting website because it talks about exams, and yet they haven't done exams for years and don't look like they're doing exams. Ian and I have met with them on a number of occasions. In fact, Ian, when he was in Australia earlier this year, met with Elizabeth Crouch, their chair, one-on-one to try and ask them what they were doing, sort it all out. But we're now, unfortunately, at the stage where lawyers are involved, and none of us wanted to get to that stage, but that's where we're at. That they've been asked to stop using the CREST logo because they're not CREST in any way, shape, or form as the global scheme, and their website is still up. So that's probably my short answer. It's ongoing. Ian, did you want to add some more flavour to that?
It's difficult for us to talk about it. As people have heard me speak about this subject before, I'm genuinely disappointed that the relationship didn't go in the direction that we started in, which was very positive. I think the difficulty I've got is if I understood the CREST ANZ strategy, we might be able to support it, or we might be able to work with them. But at the moment, it's very unclear what the strategy is moving forward and what the services that they will be providing look like. I think things like use of the logo is frustrating, but the response that you get when you email them is not very fast and not very productive. So I think that sort of waters down the brand generally. But no, if we understood what their strategy was, I'm sure that there is a position where we could continue to work together in some form. The difficulty is that I'm unclear of what their strategy is. I don't think, Nigel, you know what their strategy is either, and therefore it's very difficult to see how we can fit all these things together. There is so much work to do. It seems a real shame to add confusion to the marketplace and not be in a position to work collaboratively.
Look, and on that, we're doing all that we can as individuals as well, and getting out there and speaking to organisations. And we understand as an advisory board that it's difficult, and our customers in Australia don't understand still the difference between ANZ and international. We're all out there as individuals. So as member companies, we ask you all to as well speak to your customers, help them to understand that there is a difference, and that we are the official organisation and the one that's supported by the CREST UK scheme and the system, and we are the local chapter. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to come back to anyone on this call, or reach out to Nigel or Ian or anyone, and we'll happily take up that discussion. But there's only so much we can do standing on top of rooftops and shouting when we get asked the question. So it's up to all of us. It's not just this group. But if there are any further questions on that, then all of us are happy to field those with specific customers.
So the model we have with Nigel supporting us with an advisory group is the model that we're trying to roll out in other parts of the world as well. So that sort of joint custody model doesn't work particularly well, because there's often a conflict of interests, and I think that sort of clarity of direction is really important for an organisation such as ours. So the model we've now got in Australia is the model that we're trying to roll out in other parts of the world, because I believe it's the right one.
And has been very successful.
I believe so, yep.
That's great, thank you very much. So I'd like to thank all of the panel today. And one thing I would like to just say, Richard Davis was on, his camera wasn't working. So sorry about that, Richard. I know you were there in the background. So yeah, thank you for coming on. If you would like to say a couple of words before we finish today, you are more than welcome.
Oh, thanks, Debbie. No, I was just going to say apologies for lurking in the background without a camera. Yeah, that's it really.
Excellent. But yeah, I wanted to include you because as Nigel and Ian, everyone and Nick have all said, that please reach out to any of the advisory board if you want to talk to them, and they are there to answer any questions. So please feel free to do that. So just moving on, we'd like to say a big thank you to the panel today. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time out to speak to everybody and to do this webinar. We really appreciate it at CREST. And thank you to all of the attendees as well today for coming on and for the questions that you posed to the panel, even for that tricky one right at the end. So thank you. So yes, so I'll probably hand over just for Nigel and Ian to say a last couple of words. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and also thank Ali. I'd just like to just echo those thanks, particularly to Ian also for your continuous and tireless efforts, for being up so late at night, and also for the guys on the call for your support of everything that we do. It's exciting times. There's a lot to do, and welcome people's involvement, ideas, anything. Please reach out.
No, I've got nothing to add, but I would like to thank the group that's representing Australasia. That they're doing a very good job. It's quite refreshing to see the level of enthusiasm we have when we have our regional meetings. So I'd like to thank them on your behalf.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for, Ian. More than happy to contribute and do our piece.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody, and I'm sure we'll be doing another webinar shortly, talking about terminology with red teaming, purple teaming, and anything else that we can do.
Yeah,
so
that's a good one to continue the discussion.
Yeah, we'll start with the rainbow books. Yeah.
We get some boxing gloves out for that.
Some red and blue ones, 100%.
That's a whole different webinar. So great, thank you so much to you all today, and thank you everyone, and have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Bye.